Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us this edition of Leak Project. I'm your host, Rex Bear, and we have a really cool opportunity for you guys to hear about a new cooperative digital governance. Now, if you go to asc.ai, to read about different people and what they've put together, it's called Fractal Evolution. It's physical, digital, social, legal, economic systems that mimic nature and evolve consciousness. Leading edge modern technology infused with sacred indigenous wisdom. Our systems are formed from hundreds of case use examples from land based on online communities and the awakening sovereignty network. So this is great, you guys. Really excited to hear what you have to say. How you doing?
Doing wonderful.
Great,
Wonderful.
thank you.
Absolutely.
Good
All
to
right.
be here.
Well, let's get into this movement. I mean, how is it going? How did you get it started? And we'll go from there.
All right. I've been doing the groundwork for this for more than a decade, and a little over 5 years ago, got to the point where I was able to connect with quite a few other like-minded beings, and we created an organization called the Tribe of Awakening Sovereignty, which you can Google if you want to see what that's about. But it was the network, basically, networking all of these eco-villages together with these technology companies and with the software systems and these economic systems. We just listed everything out all together. And we made maps of it all, and kind of like was also a media agency that told people about everything that existed in what we called the new paradigm. But it wasn't enough. So that's when we created the ASC, which has been live for about half a year at this point. And it's going very, very well. Would you like to?
So yeah, let me jump in real quick. I'm looking at your website right now, and it says 204 land bases, 9 unique cooperative business models, 11 million social media users reached. And I'm thinking of this area that was in, man, was it in New Mexico? I can't remember exactly, but it reminded me of like Hobbit Village, essentially, because it was a bunch of these eco homes that were built with recyclable materials. A lot of them, you could see that they were like glass containers, plastic bottles and stuff, but they were really neat homes, and some of them were like built into the dirt. You could tell that they were efficient, and there were people actually pulling off the freeway just to get a glimpse of these things. And I certainly appreciate anybody that wants to do something that's organic and uses technology with some of the old school effects, I guess you could say, like have balance and harmony with Mother Nature and everything else involved with nature, as well as have stuff that you could use technology to be productive. So I like where you're going with this, but you said it wasn't enough. Well, with 204 land bases, I mean, that's a lot of mass right there, isn't it? I mean, how many people are involved in this that are doing this type of network? Are you working with Fortune 500 companies? Are you working with larger corporations? I mean, what is it going to take to get this thing to pop? Because is that one area that I brought up a part of this network? And I know I asked a whole bunch of questions, so.
That one in particular is not, as far as I'm aware. And it's not enough because we have access to all this land and all these buildings, and there's no one in them. People might know these places exist, but they don't choose to live there. Many people continue to choose to work a low-wage job to barely be able to afford their rent in a city rather than explore these places. And as far as getting it to pop more, a large-scale investor would help. And so far, no, there are no large corporations who are part of anything like this. They're kind of the antithesis. However, the ASC is designed to be a model that appeals to large-scale investment consciousness while also being made out of the grassroots of the new paradigm movement, which is based around unconditionally providing for basic human rights and the extension of human rights, like the right to clean water, the right to food, the right to free education, free power, and free housing, is what we would call the new paradigm.
So I've traveled the country extensively. In 2013, I put over 60,000 miles on my car. Plus, I flew to Anchorage with the work that I was doing at the time. And I remember there was a couple places in Nebraska that had some free land, essentially, where you could homestead. And I think there's some places in Alaska, but that's all that I know of. So when you said there's 204 land bases, and a lot of these people don't want to be a part of, that, like you say, rather work a job where they can barely survive in these conditions that somebody might look at as kind of rough, but essentially they're in the location that they want to be in. They're living the city lifestyle or in the grid. So where are these places at? This is fascinating.
They're in almost half the countries in the world. There are maps available at several points in our website. Yes, so you can just take a look at it. You can look at every single location. It'll tell you a detailed summary about that community, what it's like. It'll link you to their website where you can learn even more about them and then get their contact information, hit them up, go give them a visit. There's a lot on the west coast of America. About 60 or 70 of these places are in the United States. The rest are in South America, Europe, a few in Africa, a couple in Australia, and just a very small handful in the east, Far East.
Okay, so 60 or 70 in the U.S. Where would those mainly be located?
The ones that I'm familiar with are mostly on the West Coast. There are three around Eugene. There's a handful in Northern California. There's a few in Arizona, a couple in Southern California, etc. I would just check out the map.
And you're a part of this how? You're just kind of spearheading everything? Are you a media spokesperson for the project?
I like to think of myself as the center coordinator.
Okay.
And I want to talk a little bit about these locations too. So we have a couple standard of criteria that all of these communities are in alignment with. The first one is cooperative. None of them are centrally owned. There is no central ownership. The second is striving for sustainability and in action towards that. And then the third is a level of emotional quality control, so to speak, I call it, but other people call it emotional therapy, or the people there know how to communicate effectively. And if you go there and you don't communicate effectively, they will teach you, or you will have to leave because everyone there communicates effectively. Yeah. Other than that, though, each community is very different. Could be like a bunch of nature-loving hippies or technology geeks, or you name it. So many different kinds of communities that exist.
Well, let me get this straight then. The land itself, essentially, is that in a trust that everybody that's a part of the community has a part of that trust, or how is that going to be worked out? Is it still individual ownership on these 200 and something properties, or?
There are many different cases. Some people it isn't a trust. Some people it's in an LLC.
You okay there, people,
man? Choking on a little bit of water over here.
We could take a second off. That's all right, man. I was like, "Are you in Colorado?" I'm just kidding. Tough crowd. All right, you good?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, actually, maybe Leela can answer this question.
Yeah, the land holdings are, some of these started in the 60s and then some of these are newer. So any kind of financial model that you might hold land under, these would be held. But they do have that level of sort of more unity consciousness, more of a cooperative business feel to them. But when you mentioned land trusts, that's something that's very exciting because a lot of us that are stewarding the new paradigm of the new earth know that the land is being given back to the earth. And so many people with these lands that are arriving and are part of this list are saying, we want to give our lands into a trust and stewardship. And so there's this sovereignty and this reclaiming of, what's good for the planet through these lands, and kind of coming together and giving people the opportunity to bring their lands into the trust. And then we help them support and realize their dreams, perhaps on the land or in their heart that they really want to be a part of a community. So a lot of people, have 2 homes or many homes, and there's just a lot of vacant spaces. And so it's just, we have an amazing opportunity to offer, this different way of being. Like, the new paradigm in a lot of ways is flipped upside down from the old thoughts of ownership and scarcity. And people are really saying, I want to give you what I have in exchange for living in a whole new way in which I am thriving versus just surviving.
Thank you, Leela. And pulling it back to the state of it as it is now, it's really by community. Maybe about a third of communities are actually in cooperative land trusts legally, and then the other 2/3 are privately owned on paper, and then the spirit of the community is group owned. However, we're educating everyone now on about how to place land into trusts that are owned by other corporations that are actually owned by churches, so we can have freedom from taxes. And that's the service we provide to landowners. We're in alignment.
Now, that's interesting. Another thing, too, is no matter what somebody's religion is, if they're a part of a faith-based community, if they have a spiritual belief, or, whether they believe in nature, or if they think source is something different, or even if they're, I guess, atheist, essentially, and they don't believe in a higher power, they think you're dirt and that's it when you go. It doesn't really matter as long as some of these people have a certain, one common goal or certain goals that they can connect with. So that's one thing about Leak Project is we talk to people on a wide variety of lifestyles, in different topics, different genres. And one thing that I think is the underlying theme with every show that I produce or that we put together on the Leak Project is, how is this going to better the audience? How is this going to better the world? Because it seems to be out of balance in so many ways. And I've heard so many people before say there's this new paradigm, things are changing. And I guess at a certain level, yeah, it always is. There's no such thing as things standing still. There's always change. But is it really changed enough to where the vision that you have, which I can appreciate, when you read the Fractal Evolution, the way that you have that just 4-line blip, physical, digital, social, legal, economic systems that mimic nature and evolve consciousness. How cool is that? And then using modern technology and infusing it with sacred indigenous wisdom, that's amazing. And I feel bad for the Native Americans that lost their lifestyle. I feel bad for the Aborigines and many of these shamans and these native cultures that seem to have been systematically destroyed. And hopefully there can be, this new paradigm of the balance with Mother Nature and everything else, and combined with technology to be used for us, not to enslave us. So tell us more about the program. Let's get into this. I'd really like to hear what you guys have to say and where you're going with it, and maybe enough people will hear about it that it can be somewhat of a 100 monkey syndrome if people want to be a part of this movement.
Excellent. Yeah, so it starts in or I guess it really starts on the ground, right, with the communities. That's what holds space for everything that I'm about to get into. And then that's what's built directly on that ground are cooperative businesses. Anything from food forestry, which is a more efficient way of producing food, to automated food and medicine production, to various forms of art, centered mostly around events in the business, to various services like website design or sales. A lot. There's a handful of them that create the thriving abundance for us to be more than just our words, right? I think that's something that's very unique about the ASC and the fractal of all of these groups that want these things, is that we can systematically produce revenue, which we systematically reinvest into producing more revenue and obtaining more land and obtaining more tools for our people to have. And that's kind of what we're focused on, is acquisition of our planet back. And as far as how that is going, we've acquired over 4,000 acres directly ourselves. And we have access to software systems that are evaluated at multi-millions of dollars. And talking about that, so we have forms of artificial intelligence that help us reach people on the internet. They find people based on the words they're using, and they speak to them, they interact with them, they comment, they send them a message, they direct them to various parts of the new paradigm. And then we have a series of systems to onboard people and allow them to integrate into all of these lands and these businesses, so we can all thrive together. And it's quite a software system. It's composed of, like, on the front user end, more than 40 completely different things that all do different functions. Anything from a snapshot of, like, all the projects we're working on, which, by the way, we're working on about 42 different epic projects right now, from land development to starting different businesses to writing different kinds of new software systems no one has ever seen or even really thought of before.
You picked the magic number 42, man.
Yeah, well, that's just how it is right now. It goes up and down all the time. So part of where the digital systems that, like, allow people to see everything going on, allow them to know more about it in a way that's fun and interactive, and kind of choose what roles they want to fill. It's combined with, like, content project and customer management systems with all these different graphs and charts, and weighted action voting. So as a collective, anytime you play in the ASC, we have what are called established award rates. So every single thing you can do, we have an award of governance and resource shares that we distribute. So the more you play with us, the more of a say you have in everything that we are. Governance shares, each one is a vote. We make choices by 51% majority consensus, though historically speaking have never dropped below 91% consensus so far. To date,
so you're
over
talking
300 people.
The epitome of democracy. I mean, that is absolutely kind of like, if there's, you've heard the old saying, if you've got 7 people for dinner, you've got, essentially 4 wolves and 3 sheep, and they all vote to have sheep, or 4 of them vote to have sheep for dinner, and 3 of them, I mean, it's kind of like that thing, essentially.
Kind of, when it comes down to it. However, we really encourage all of us to try to reach the same agreement, which is why I like the morality of the practice of the system. We've always reached 91% or more, where if it's like, instead of it being 4 wolves and 3 sheep, there's just like 3 sets of 4 beings that have slightly different intentions, but they're all attempting to share the same intentions with each other through compromise. However,
if you're getting
at the end
91
of the day,
sorry to interrupt, I was just going to say, if you're getting 91 out of 100 people to agree on things, I mean, that's pretty awesome.
we're actually almost always getting 100 out of 100, because there's a single right way generally, and there's a smartest action, and you can prove it. And we all just like to see what the right thing is, and we're all open to it.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah. Yes. And then the biggest contention point is always how much money people are getting. That is the only thing we've ever disagreed on. It's funny. But kind of moving on to the resource shares, and that's the other part of the system. And that's how much of everything that we steward that you have. And then the final element is the ability to request access. So those 42 projects I told you about were all requested by one of our members. And then the rest of us voted to approve that project, and then we bring it into reality. We get the funding for it. We have the land for it. Whatever the skills are that are needed, we provide it. And currently, we're pretty much focused on projects that are both humanitarian, so they benefit the world, but that also multiply income. That's what our cooperative business models are all about. So that's where 90% of our energy is going right now, because we'd rather feed 1 million people than feed 1,000 people. But here, quite soon, I think in the next couple months, we'll actually have a much bigger budget for our members to request access for the funding they need to live. And that is a huge priority for us, is to be able to unconditionally provide for all of the needs of those that choose to dedicate themselves into this new way of being.
Now, the software you were talking about, that sounds fascinating. The artificial intelligence software. There's a supercomputer that's coming out by IBM that's a silicon-based computer that's going to be running 300 quadrillion floating points per second within the next year. And there's one right now running 93 petaflops, which is 93 quadrillion floating points per second. So I'm imagining this software being ran with these supercomputers and basically playing out sims with each person on the planet based upon a threat matrix. And I'm thinking of all these Department of Defense contracts and stuff like that you could probably get that you wouldn't want to necessarily sign with the devil. But who came up with that stuff, man? That's crazy.
Something that I've been working on for the last 5 years. And,
oh, it's yours.
And many others. There's been over 40 developers of it so far, and we've purchased many, many other systems that have gone into it. At the end of the day, there have been many thousands of people that have worked on for quite some time on what we have. But what we have is nothing close to what IBM would have, or any kind of military contractor. But
it's not like Terminator Skynet.
Yeah, nothing like that. Our AI just performs functions, very specific functions, and it does learn how to better perform those functions. And it's getting better at learning how to get better, but it only does a very specific set of things, a very small spectrum of abilities compared to these other groups out there, like less than 1% of the total functionalities for sure.
But it can actually learn?
Yeah, that's arguable. I don't want to get into the technicalities of it too much.
That's
but
fine.
It can look at analytical data and make better choices based on the analytical data of the results of the impact of what it did before. Yes, in a very specific way. Specifically, social media is what it can do that with.
Now, that's incredible. So, okay, I like where you're going with that. And it sounds like it's something you guys are still working on. This reminds me of about a year ago, maybe it was a little bit longer, there was an entire town for sale in South Dakota. And it was less than $300,000. And you had the post office, you had the pub, and you had the other approximately, I don't know, it was a couple of acres. It was a very small area, but the fact of the matter was it was your own township. So essentially you could set up your own mayor, your own sheriff. And what I'm wondering is, I know people, I don't know where you're going with this. I mean, is this something that you are wanting to have? You know, are you setting up treaties? I know people that have these treaties and stuff that they basically fill out in this paperwork. I don't know enough about it to give any advice whatsoever on it. I just know people that work on these treaties that basically make them sovereign, so they say, to where they have different rights than other people that are considered citizens of the corporate United States of America, essentially. So,
right.
You know, once again, I don't know enough about it, but that's why I'm asking you.
Yes, so I am relatively very well educated in this topic. And also educated enough to know I don't know most of it, but I know the gist of all of it, and I'm well connected to those that have spent their life knowing this kind of stuff. And the reality, of my understanding, is that there are ways to become sovereign within the United States. However, in practice, those ways are not, doesn't matter. It doesn't actually protect you if there are elite or of many different forms that decide that they want you in a cage. So we're going about doing something that not many other people have done. The Catholic Church did this with the Vatican, and to some element, Scientology has also successfully done this.
Oh, they had their own navy for a while.
Yeah, right. So they've succeeded in this, and so we're looking to them as to how to recreate what actual sovereignty really looks like. And so there's a lot that's going on legally as far as like those churches with the interconnected with the corporations, with the LLCs and all kinds of other things that I don't really know too deeply about, but it's its own arcane art that you had to have paid a ton of money for and spent a lot of your time learning. And we have 2 churches at this point and are looking to kind of make a conglomerate of churches, and then have that connected to an entity that is actually sovereign as recognized by the United Nations. And then as forming kind of an entity with that, with all of these international churches that are these weaves of all these other organizations, along with, at that point, partnering with whatever nations wanted to partner with us in exchange for our services. And this would be more like a year or 2 down the road, because at that point, we also need to have a ridiculous amount of money and a pretty epic amount of global media coverage, which is what we're building into. But yeah, that's the plan. And then when the whole world knows what we are and are reading our media, and we've made pacts with these different countries, and we have all of the paperwork in order, and not with just with the U.S., but with the United Nations as well, and maybe a couple of other groups, then we can actually have our sovereignty respected. Because if it's violated by on any of our people, if any of us are like unjustly imprisoned, or if they're unjustly trying to make us pay taxes, then we can make it into a global issue. And that's what actually protects you, because the letter of the law does not matter in the United States. It is only your ability to like draw awareness to it and like have a level of power where you have some other power players that have your back if that happens. And that's what we're going for.
You know, that's smart. And I also remember reading about the sovereign, it's citizen movement. And if somebody's sovereign, then to call them a sovereign citizen is an oxymoron. Yet there is that portrayal in the media of sovereign citizen movement. And if you ever say, oh, that person is a sovereign or that person is a sovereign citizen, typically, I shouldn't say whenever you say that, but if you say it or hear about it in the media, or oftentimes if you're just talking to somebody about it, they're going to look at that as kind of like, oh, militiaman. And it's also the government. I even read specifically, they can classify somebody as a possible domestic terrorist, which they could do that with a lot of people, but specifically with that movement. And if you're labeled as a domestic terrorist, I mean, you've got the Patriot Act and the NDAA and so many bills in play that, like you said, you know, you could disappear. You might go to work one day, walk outside to get your newspaper, and then never see again. And then they'd say, well, look, there's a traffic cam over there. Let's check the traffic cams and see if we can find it. So what do? They check the traffic cams, and the traffic cams are blinked. And they're like, wow, well, that's odd. That thing was scrubbed. They can't figure it out. Well, when the people at the top levels have the keys to all this kind of stuff, you know, it's one of those things where you just got to be very, very careful. So I'm glad you brought that up about how, you know, you got to be real careful with that kind of stuff, because people need to be aware. You hear about something where maybe you know Joe down the street that says, oh, you know, I did this and I'm now sovereign, and a lot of times that stuff will come back to haunt you. So I definitely appreciate that.
Use it. Yeah, if you use it and go to court a bunch about it, yeah, they'll just nab you. And that's why the letter of the law doesn't matter when they can do that. But yeah, just looking again to the groups that successfully did that, though, and they did it by working with those guys, not against them. And that's what we're here to do. We're not against anybody. We want to be everyone's friend.
Beautiful.
That's the angle.
I like that. I like where you're going with that. The win-win situation. If you can make it beneficial enough for the U.S. government, and if you can, you know, give them enough of a large enough piece of the pie, essentially, to keep them off your back and keep them happy and fed, well, that's a much smarter thing to do than yeah, I like that. I like where you're going with that. You know, with the last few minutes that we have, please share any information with us here at the Leak Project. Give us information on how we can contact you. If, you know, somebody likes where you're going with this, they want to know more about it, or if somebody has a business and maybe they're looking to get in with something like this, please give us your information. And thanks for coming on the show with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, yeah, asc.ai, enter in through there, check out our interface. asc.ai/join is how you can be a part of it all and learn more. We have basically roles and ways people can play in every way that we could think of. There's stuff to do online, offline, in your area with your friends. There's like skilled stuff to do. There's a bunch of stuff anyone can do. We do morning meditations almost every morning at 10 a.m. Pacific time, and we do that through a group Zoom meeting. Those are fantastic. I recommend checking that out. You can find those links through asc.ai/team chat. Yeah, I would just recommend exploring our /info page, reading through our story, signing up, looking through the interface. And something that we're really big on right now is our media. So we are looking to all of the top media agencies that produce stuff in English, and we're collecting the best solutionary positive content from all of our members. So that's a way anyone can play. Just give us good media content to broadcast. And then the other way is we're using some of these software systems to take those posts, credit them appropriately, and then propagate them out to hundreds of places all over the internet to just seed all of human consciousness with the ideas that will help them be free and empowered and inspired and in love. And it's we focus on technology. We focus on comparison solutions, like how things are in the U.S. compared to how they are in countries where they're doing it super well, and it's like very obviously a better way of being. And we focus on spirituality, specifically applied spirituality. Like how do you really get through what's bothering you to get into more of a bliss state, a happiness state, an empowered state where you feel supported and connected to the rest of reality? How do you really do that? Well, we focus on techniques and abilities and videos and articles and images that help you with that. And I think that's about all I have. Leela.
Yeah.
Would you like to share anything?
Yeah, just thanks for having us on. I noticed that you have a super cool media site as well. And one thing at the AAC that's super fun is we're just always creating relationships and partnerships. Because, like you said earlier, with the new paradigm, it is about win-win. So, just really honored to be asked on this call tonight, and I look forward to further partnership.
Hey, right on. I was honored that you guys reached out. I certainly appreciate what you're doing. And, when you read that mission statement, that's strong. That is powerful to me. And I certainly feel it's going to be with our audience as well. I often say, as a motto here at the Leak Project, and this isn't mine, I didn't come up with this. I kind of took this from Gandhi and shortened it up a bit. It's be the change you want to see. And you guys are doing that. And there's a lot of people that are part of the network that are doing that as well. And I certainly appreciate that. So definitely check you guys out. And also go to youtube.com/clandestine time lord. I'm just going to give a quick shout out to a couple of our sponsors. I was very selective when I picked our sponsors. There's getthetea.com. This stuff is awesome. I just take one pill a day. It's like a detox pill. And because I'm not completely organic vegan, and also, just check out these one-tack flashlights. They're like 1,200 lumens. They fit in your hand, and they're really good for seeing in the dark and self-defense. So that's my shameless plug, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for listening, and once again, be the change you want to see. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us this edition of Leak Project. I'm your host, Rex Bear, and we have a really cool opportunity for you guys to hear about a new cooperative digital governance. Now, if you go to asc.ai to read about different people and what they've put together, it's called Fractal Evolution. It's physical, digital, social, legal, economic systems that mimic nature and evolve consciousness. Leading edge modern technology infused with sacred indigenous wisdom. Our systems are formed from hundreds of case use examples from land based on online communities and the Awakening Sovereignty Network. So this is great, you guys. Really excited to hear what you have to say. How you doing?
Doing wonderful.
Great,
Wonderful.
thank you.
Absolutely.
Good
All
to
right.
be here.
Well, let's get into this movement. I mean, how is it going? How did you get it started? And we'll go from there.
All right. I've been doing the groundwork for this for more than a decade. And a little over 5 years ago, got to the point where I was able to connect with quite a few other like-minded beings. And we created an organization called the Tribe of Awakening Sovereignty, which you can Google if you want to see what that's about. But it was the network, basically, networking all of these eco-villages together with these technology companies and with the software systems and these economic systems. We just listed everything out all together. And we made maps of it all and kind of like was also a media agency that told people about everything that existed in what we called the new paradigm. But it wasn't enough. So that's when we created the ASC, which has been live for about half a year at this point. And it's going very, very well. Would you like to?
So yeah, let me jump in real quick. I'm looking at your website right now, and it says 204 land bases, 9 unique cooperative business models, 11 million social media users reached. And I'm thinking of this area that was in, was it in New Mexico? I can't remember exactly, but it reminded me of like Hobbit Village, essentially, because it was a bunch of these eco homes that were built with recyclable materials. A lot of them, you could see that they were like glass containers, plastic bottles and stuff, but they were really neat homes. And some of them were like built into the dirt. You could tell that they were efficient, and there were people actually driving, pulling off the freeway just to get a glimpse of these things. And I certainly appreciate anybody that wants to do something that's organic and uses technology with some of the old school effects, I guess you could say, like have balance and harmony with